Now the Wolves, there's a weird one for me. The Wolves are beating teams they shouldn't beat, and they're losing to teams that they should beat. And so it just doesn't add up with where the Wolves are. Like you look at them beating the Warriors and they beat the Grizzlies, but then they lose to the Pistons. Like my daughter to this day still brings up the fact that they lost to the Pistons. I'm like, but baby, they beat the Grizzlies though. She's like, but Dad, they lost to the Pistons and the Pistons suck. And I'm like, yeah, but they beat the Grizzlies. And so even my daughter doesn't like that they lost to the Pistons. And so I don't know if it's maybe the way the Pistons run their offense. I don't know if it's the matchup issues, but the crazy thing is the Warriors at full strength without any bigs, they matched little for little, and the Timberwolves won. D'Lo went nuts. Sam brought up a great point. Is D'Lo untradeable, or is he really of value to this team? There's a lot in that question. Like, should Gobert be moved on at some point? Like, should you try to trade again for Gobert? Like, trade him away because maybe Cat is the only big you need. And in the West and in this league, there's not a ton of teams that, like, it doesn't matter. If Gobert's not a scorer, having another big really doesn't help you. David Robinson and Tim Duncan were big-time scorers. Olajuwon and Ralph Sampson were scorers. Gobert's not a scorer. So this double big thing they try to do, I don't think it's going to work. Jokic and Cat, yes, that would work. Those are two elite scorers. Gobert, no, it's not working. But they found a way to win without him. So all of that is one big question. I'll start with you, Luke. But what's going on with the Warriors, like the Timberwolves? Like, is D'Lo untradeable? Like, is he worth keeping?
Yeah.
And is Gobert in the way?
Yeah, first I'll just say, like, the fact that they are beating teams like the Grizz and the Warriors, it shows you when they're on and they're playing together at full strength, it shows you their potential and their ceiling, and it makes those losses to the Pistons in the lower tier all the more frustrating. But as far as D'Lo goes, is he untradeable? Well, which D'Lo are you trading? Because if you're trading the one that you've been getting as of late, specifically as a closer in the fourth quarter, that dude's been unbelievable. I mean, this always just felt like kind of this young team with a lot of talent. They were able to get out to these early leads and make a splash and have some highlights, but always such a hard time closing out games. D'Lo's been the one who's really taken over that veteran leadership role the last few weeks anyways with Cat on. He's really been kind of the glue this team has needed, helped a guy like Ant flourish the way he has. And he's tied, I looked up the stat, he's tied fourth most 14-plus point fourth quarters this season with 5. 4 of those 5 games turned into wins. So he's cashing these not only great late game performances, but he's turning them into wins too. And I know he started out really cold. We all remember that. But as of late, averaging over 20 points per game, averaging nearly 50% from the floor, averaging nearly 50% from 3. The guy virtually is automatic from the stripe. Check this out. In the month of January, there was only 2 guys in the entire NBA that averaged 20 points per game while shooting 45% or higher from 3, Nikola Jokic and D'Angelo Russell. And I think most importantly, too, in my opinion, he's helping Ant get to places in his game we just all hoped and prayed for when the season started, and it took him a while to gel and figure things out. But as of late, you look at the last 17 games, they're 12-5, 7 games above 500. And when Ant and D'Lo are on the court together, you got a net rating of plus 7.8. So I just think they finally found their rhythm a little bit. They found their trust in one another, which is huge. That was always a big question. And now that they're 6-2 in their last 8, 12-5 in their last 17, I'm thinking, how does Coach Finch keep this momentum and chemistry rolling when you do get Cat back, Rudy's ready to play more again? Because you never mess with a good thing. And right now, the Wolves got a good thing going. And you can say it's a great problem to have, like getting Cat and Rudy healthy, but that's a slippery slope too once you start messing with those pieces of the puzzle while you're winning. And to be honest, I really don't know the answer to that, Ron.
What you got, Reggie?
Yeah, it's interesting. We keep saying, like, when Cat comes back. When is Cat coming back? Like, you would have thought that maybe he would have been back by now, but we're not getting much of any reports from the team regarding his progress. There was a stretch where he wasn't with the team on the bench. He was with them, and then he wasn't. Everybody's like, well, where's Cat? Like, oh, okay, well, he's better when he's not there because he could rest the calf a little bit more, or this is just a natural part of his rehab process and all that stuff. But it's just like, okay, when is he coming back? But
what was the initial timeline? Sorry to interrupt. What was the initial timeline, though? Was he supposed to be back by now?
Yeah, he was slated to be back by now, but
okay.
He claims that the timeline was inaccurate, and there's some conspiracy about whether the team released an inaccurate timeline so that the season tickets or the ticket sales wouldn't lag and people wouldn't get discouraged. There's some talk about that. I don't know if it's true.
Yeah, so that whole thing is like a mystery, but maybe we'll see him again soon. But it is going to be tough when he does come back because they had some chemistry issues when he and Rudy were out there. And you look at Rudy's stats, and the last several games he's double. He's averaging 14, 15, 16 even rebounds a night. And I think Rudy is doing what Rudy has always done. But he's not a guy that is gonna, back in the day, you could throw the ball to Shaq, and Shaq, back you down, do a little spin move, dunk on you, and all that. Like, Rudy's not a guy that is creating his own shot, even in the paint. Like, he's a lob candidate, just pick and roll, throw it up to him, dunk it down. Like, he's not a guy that is generating his own offense. And so I think that's the tough part when you look at that trade with all that they gave up. They weren't trading for a player like James Harden or, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, or, name your superstar. You were trading for Rudy Gobert. And I think that's the part where, I was talking to Henry Lake, and he was saying, like, look, Rudy is doing what they brought him here to do. But yeah, we overpaid, like the Timberwolves overpaid for him, but that's what they felt like they needed. And so I think that's what the tough part about that is, especially when Cat comes back. And in terms of D'Lo, here's the thing about D'Lo. He's doing what he always does. Like, you look at how he played when he was in Brooklyn. You look at, years past, even with the Wolves since he's been here in Minnesota, like, he goes on these like streaks of just playing absolute lights out basketball. But then he also goes on some times where he's just like, what are you doing? No, don't do that. And, I think some of these shots that he's making, especially like that game against the Warriors in that fourth quarter where he did the back-to-back threes to put them within one, like, some of those shots were like, no. And then they went in. It was like, oh, and so I think that's something that D'Lo is doing. And I'm not saying that he is untradeable. I'm not saying that he is tradable. But what I will say is, if you are in the mood to make a deal, I don't think his trade value is any higher than it is right now. So it's like, if you were going to do something, maybe this will be the right time to do it, because even after an off night the other night, he comes back and scores 29 against his former team, the Warriors, and it's a big time win against those guys. So this may be the window to do something if you're going to do it, but he is playing justifiably where you're like, maybe we just keep him around and see how far he can take this thing.
What you got next, Sam?
Yeah, I don't think that you can look at your fans and get rid of D'Lo at this point with a straight face. Like, he's just too valuable to their hopes of being a higher seed. Mm-hmm. And I think this team still wants to win. Like, they have no intention of trading pieces for a better draft pick at this point. Like, you can legitimately be a 4, 5, or 6 seed. You can avoid the play-in round. D'Lo is fueling your success. Naz Reid is fueling your success. Ant, obviously. Austin Rivers actually stepping up big. People are figuring out their roles right now. I do worry if Cat and Gobert both get healthy, how you manage that, because you clearly can't just try to log jam them all in. Also, you got to save room for Naz Reid to get minutes. Naz Reid is an inside-outside threat. He had the clinching dunk against Golden State. Fans love watching him. I love watching him 10 times more than Rudy Gobert. I don't care if he's not as good at defense or blocking shots. But, guys, the Wolves are fun to watch right now, legitimately. They were not for a long time. They are now. And I have to say, as someone who's been a trade D'Lo guy, D'Lo's got to stay.
Yeah, I agree with that. I say D'Lo stays. I say Rudy Gobert goes. I hate to do it that way, but D'Lo stays, Gobert goes. I look at all these other teams because I think with Rudy Gobert, you're limited in what you can do. And when you look at the Timberwolves and what they could possibly do, there's a 6th seed. You got the Warriors at the 9th seed. You got the Kings. And so just looking at the Kings, you got the Kings as the 3rd seed. They go out there with Keegan Murray, De'Aaron Fox, Sabonis, Kevin Huerter, and Malik Monk. Like, they're not playing with two bigs. Like, nobody's really playing with two bigs anymore. And so even like two really, really bigs, I mean, like a big power forward and a big center, like nobody's doing that. So I just think going with athletes, guys that can play well together. You put Cat as your 4. Your 5 can be anybody. It could just be an enforcer. It doesn't have to be a 7-footer, just somebody who's strong and big that can move people. That's where I think it's going to go for them. If Cat's the 5, I get it, but there's no more Shaqs. So as long as Cat doesn't get handsy and get fouls, he's fine. So I think that that's the key is, and then stop whining when he gets back in the game. But I think that's the key. You keep D'Lo, you move on from Gobert, you find some pieces. I think you should never made the trade in the first place because clearly you look at the players out there. Walker Kessler is actually making the Jazz a better team. But hey, it's too late now. We made the decision. We moved on.